Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's CI Tools webinar. My name is Josh Osborne, and I'm the product manager here at Central Innovation, for the CI Tools, that is, at Central Innovation. And welcome to today's weekly session on the CI Tools. This is a session that we run every Thursday to talk about stuff to do with the CI Tools, whether it be how-to guides or information about certain workflows, maybe information about updates to the tools or new features, and sometimes we just look at a tool starting from scratch that maybe you didn't know about, and that's what we're going to be doing today. Actually, we're going to look at the metadata tool today. We're going to be working in ArchiCAD 27, but the basic functionality of the tool has been the same since 25. So if you're using a slightly older version, you'll be able to still do everything that we're going to be doing today. And that, if you are anywhere in the world and you want to try out the metadata tool, you can head to MyCI and grab a trial version of that. If you already have a MyCI login, just head to myci.centralinnovation.com, grab the CI Tools installer from there, and then you'll be ready to go. If you already have the CI Tools installer on your computer, just run that and install the metadata tool from the Trials tab. And if you don't have either, you can sign up for a trial by going to myci.centralinnovation.com/free trial, and that will let you sign up for a trial and you can get started using the metadata tool. So yeah, first of all, what is the metadata tool? Well, as you can probably tell from the name, it follows the naming for most of the CI tools, in that the name just describes what it does. And in this case, it is a tool for helping you work with metadata in your project. So by metadata specifically, what we mean is properties and classifications. So these are parts of all of the elements in ArchiCAD that can have various different properties assigned to them. And the metadata tool provides a nice way of interacting with those and working with those. It's of particular use, I would say, to BIM managers and people sort of doing checking on the projects and that sort of thing, because it makes it much easier to figure out whether you are up to date on all of the metadata in your elements, if there's anything missing or wrong or not matching or anything like that. It's really good for that, but it is also useful generally for most people as well, if checking on your metadata or just working with metadata is something that you do frequently. So normally the way that you access the metadata in your elements is that you will select the element and then either open up, it's not even going to show for this one, open up this option here and you can see a list of all of the metadata here, and you can go through and select the elements you want and make changes, or you can open the settings, go down to the classification and properties section here, and then find the metadata that you want to work with and make changes there. The reason that we made the metadata tool is because essentially doing that is a bit clunky. And if you are doing this on large amounts of elements, it's quite time consuming, because if you select multiple elements in here and then open up that metadata, you may not see the kind of thing that you're expecting. For instance, if I select these three and go in, you can see that, well, you don't know it yet, sorry, but some of these values that it's showing is actually showing me the value of the last selected element, not the value of all of them. So this is an area that the metadata tool can help with. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to open up the metadata tool. There's only one command available for the metadata tool here, apart from accessing the help, and that is to show the metadata palette. So this is essentially what the metadata tool is this floating palette. You can dock it to anywhere that you like in ArchiCAD, or just float it as I'm doing here. And it works like any other floating palette in ArchiCAD. So what we can do now is we can start using the metadata tool by selecting some elements. So I'll begin with one of these doors here. And you can see when I select this door, we can see information about this door. So it's showing all of the properties about the door here, and then down below it's also showing all of the classifications that the door is currently assigned to. So we can easily see that list of properties as I was showing before, same as what you can see in here, but we can see this on the fly by just selecting the element. So if I change to something like, that's an object, so it doesn't have any. If I change to this wall, you can see the properties of the wall. We don't have to open up different menus and that sort of thing to find all this data. It's just available there all the time as soon as we select something, which makes it quite a lot quicker to check on this stuff. Now that we're actually looking at the metadata, we can also do something with it as well. So, for instance, as we saw before, when we selected these 3 doors, it was showing that the combustible and accessible ratings were true. However, that's only true actually for this door here, but for this door, it's set to undefined, and for this door, one of them is set to true, but the other isn't. So as I was saying, when you have multiple items selected, if you use the control over here, it's going to not tell you the thing that is actually true of all of the selection, and this is one of the areas that the metadata tool can help you. So if I go through here and select these 3 doors, you will see that our metadata palette is still showing the combustible and accessible fields here, but they have this sort of I don't really know what we call this actually, triangle thing, so that we can open it out into a tree structure. So that's what I'm going to do. So with combustible, if I open that one out, we see a list of what is available. So we can see that we have 2 elements where the combustible rating is set to true, and we have 1 element where it is still undefined. And if I open accessible, we'll see something similar. So 2 of them where it's set to undefined, and 1 of them where it's set to true. So now we get an accurate representation of what exactly is going on with these properties on these 3 selected elements. So we're not getting the properties just of the thing that we most recently selected. We're getting all of the property data, and everything else is the same, so we don't see any differences there. These all look the same as they would do. And so now we can go and fix things up. So let's say that we wanted to check to make sure that all of these doors were set to combustible true, say. So we select all of the doors. We can see that they're not all set to combustible true. So we can just go through here and grab the one that's not set to that and tell that to be true as well. And now we can see that this collapses because they are all true. So there's no longer any variance there. So we just see the top level item here. We could go through to the accessible and select the 2 that are set to undefined. We could set those to both be false, like they are now, and they'll stay in that separated form because we have differing values. Or we could set them both to be true, and then it will collapse back down to show that all elements are true. So this is a good way of making sure that everything that should be uniform is in fact uniform. We can also use this for selection as well though. So if we were to deselect those doors and select just one of them, we can come through here and say that we want to select all of the doors where the combustible rating is true currently. So all we need to do is, with that door selected, we choose the property that we're interested in isolating, and then down at the bottom, click this button here, which is, it's got a kind of an icon of some things that are selected. If we press that button, what it will do is it will go through and find every element in the project, every element in the current view, where the property matches what we had selected there. So we have some other windows and doors in this project, but the combustible rating is not set to true, so it hasn't selected those. It's only selected the ones that matched our selection. And we can do the same for any of these. So if we were to go through and set this door over here to have the accessible to be false, and this one here as well, we can do the same sort of thing. So with just this element here selected, I can press the select button, and it will also, whoops, I need to select the value that I want, press the select button. It will also select the other one that I just set to be that value. So you can see that we have the 2 of them selected. Accessible false is showing there. We can see the variance in our combustible rating because we haven't set anything on this one. So this allows us to quite easily sort of sift through the data that's available in the elements in our project, make sure that they're matching, and then deal with things that aren't matching quite easily and quickly. So there's a really good method for doing that, and this will work in your 3D views and your section and elevation views as well. So you can quite easily, for instance, open up a view. Let's have a look at these beams here. So we can see all of the beams here, and let's say that we want to check that all of them are set to let's say that they're all set to have the construction type exterior non-bearing walls and partitions. So let's set that one to that. And now what we can do is we can do the same as before. So we can select all of our beams. And you can see that with my selection of beams, we've got all of these fields matching as you would expect because we haven't changed them. But the construction type is showing the little scroll out option here. And if I choose that, you'll see that 21 of them are undefined and one of them is set to exterior, non-bearing, etc. So we've identified the one outlier. Perhaps at this point we decide that actually they should all be set that way. We can do that very easily just by going through, setting this away from undefined and set it to be matching. So exterior, that was the one I think. Yeah, so now they all match there. So it's a really good way of checking, and because you can do it in 3D, you can visually see that you have all of the items that you have selected and that sort of thing. It also works for selection of classifications as well. So if we select one of these beams, we can see that it's using the ArchiCAD classification beam. We can do a selection based on that as well in the same way. So we can say, select all of my items that match this classification. Hit the select button, same as we did on the property, and you can see it goes through and selects all of the beams in the project that have been classified that way. If you have some that aren't classified that way, it won't select them. So there's a good way if you have multiple different items that have the same classifications but they're different element types, there's a good way of selecting those rather than doing the old select the item and hit Control A. This will let you do it and will take into account the classification instead. So if we do similar with columns instead, it will go through and select all of our columns and do the same with windows, anything else that you might want to work with that on. The other thing that we can do while we're working with these selections is that we can go backwards again as well. So we can remove selections. So for instance, we could, let's say we have a multi-building project. We go through and we can select all of the elements that are currently making up part of this project. And you'll see that we have a large amount of blue here because there's lots of variations of different things. And we can see a large amount of classifications here. What we can do now is we can say, actually, now that I have everything selected, what I want to do is I want to grab roofs and filter them, and it will drop the selection of everything that's not a roof. But we're not just selecting all of the roofs in the project, we're specifically selecting the roofs that were selected before and we have now filtered to. And we can do the same for other types as well. So it works in a similar way to the selection, it's just going backwards instead. So we can come in here and say, well, we have a couple of different construction types. We've got some that are undefined and some that are exterior non-bearing. I want to filter to undefined. So we'll choose this option, and now we only have the items selected where that property was set to undefined. So you can see that our beams, which we recently changed to have a definition in the properties, those are all deselected now. So again, it's a nice easy way of finding things that don't currently fit with what you should have going on, and then you can fix them up quite easily. And the same works with classifications, as we saw. Also with classifications and properties, you can use this plus button to add things as well. So if we select this beam here, you can see it's set there to ArchiCAD classification beam. We can hit the plus button here and assign different classifications to it as you would expect to do with any element that you want to. You can change those classifications there, and we can also add in properties if we like as well. So we can, at the plus button, go through and choose a property and add that in, and that element now has that property. This one doesn't make any particular sense, but if you need to add properties to anything that hasn't inherited it based on its classification, you can do that easily using this function as well. And the delete works the same way, but opposite as well. So if we decide that we actually don't want that one, we just remove it again by hitting the X. Cool. Okay. The next thing I want to look at is, so we've done our filtering and that sort of thing, which is fine. The next thing you might want to do with your elements is you might want to go through and make possibly bulk changes to elements to inject entire sets of properties. So rather than going through and selecting all of my beams, say, and giving them all a combustible rating, I want to actually override all of my beams with, say, 10 or 20 or however many properties that I preset. The tool has a way to do this as well. So you can see that as I've been doing everything so far, we've had this tick box here which says live edit turned on, and if I mouse over that you can see the description, but basically it means that any change that we make happens immediately, and also the elements that we see in this palette will be showing immediately what we have selected. So if we change selection, it will immediately change to show the settings of the new selection there. What we can do though is we can turn off live edit mode, and now we're in essentially manual edit mode. So if I select one of these beams now, you'll see we don't have anything coming through here because it's not picking up anything live. So what we can do now is you'll see that the buttons down the bottom have changed to a syringe and a eyedropper button here. And so what we can do is we can do what you would expect those two to do. We can pick up properties and inject them into other elements. So if I select one of my beams, I can pick up the properties of that beam. So you'll see those here, and it looks similar to how it did in live edit mode. And what we can do now is we can create a sort of a bucket, or like a shopping cart almost, of the properties that we want to change. So we can go through, we can remove items from the selection that we don't care about as well. So let's remove all of these bits here. And we will keep these items here, and then let's make some changes. So beam overhang, we're going to change that to 200. Profile beam length should be 133. Maximum beam span, that's fine. Let's change some other values in here. Prefabricated and cast. Class of surface, let's say it's 13 mil. Let's set the combustible rating to false. Transmissions probably doesn't make much sense, and let's set some of these values as well. Okay, so we've got a couple of changes that we've made in here, and these are different than what we actually have in this selected element. So at the moment, when we're making changes, we're not making changes live to this element because we have live mode turned off. We have made a set of changes that we want to apply into potentially multiple elements. So what we can do now is we can go and select a bunch of elements. So let's grab a handful of these beams. Okay, and we'll hit the inject button here, and that will inject those values into those beams. The rest will stay the same. We can go over and grab one of these columns. Now some of these properties won't match, but some of them will, for instance, the general ratings. So we can inject into there as well. We can go and grab a wall, if I can. There we go, there's the wall. We can inject into the wall as well. So essentially what we've done is we've created a sort of a preset list of properties that we want to get from one place to another, and then we just go around and select the elements that we want to apply them in. You could select all walls and inject them in that way, and that sort of thing if you wanted to as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn live edit mode back on. As soon as we do this, we're going to lose our bucket from here because it's going to go to live edit mode. That's not gone, it's just that you won't see it anymore. So I'll turn on live edit mode. If we select one of these beams, we can see, did I actually inject those settings? Thought I did. Anyway, you can see it here. I think I might have forgotten to inject on the actual beams, but here it is on the column and on the wall. So you can see we've got combustible as false now. 24 is inserted into here. And we've got those settings that I made to construction showing there as well. We don't get the stuff about the beams because obviously those don't apply to this wall. And the same for the column. So the column has those same setting, false, 24, exterior, prefabbed, 13 mil. That does apply on this one, so that's there, but we don't get those overhang settings or anything like that. So this can be just a really nice way of setting those up. You might have a certain element that's already got all of the pre-filled properties that you want, and you want to sort of propagate those across to everything. Just pick up the properties of that using the eyedropper function and move them across to where you want. So now that we've gone and done a bunch of checking in live mode, we can turn it back off, and you'll see that our shopping cart of changes is still sitting here and it's ready to be used somewhere else. So we can keep going and keep applying that, or we can pick up some different settings again. So we could come over and select this slab, for instance, pick up the properties of that. Doesn't have any properties. Strange. Okay, let's pick up the properties from the column instead. Not sure why my slab has no properties, but let's grab the column instead. So we pick that one up. So we can do the same here. So if this one had all of the settings that we want, all we need to do is pick up from it and then move to the element we want to inject to, or elements and inject to, and then do that inject. And the same works for classifications as well. So if I go to my slab, hopefully this has a classification at least. No, it doesn't. That's why it's got no properties. So if we go to this one here, though, the column, it does have a classification set. So we can select that, and then we could go and select one of these beams and inject that classification in. And if we switch back to live edit mode, you can see the regular beams are set to beam, but this one is now set to be a column. So we can do the same action with those as well. So that is the functionality of the metadata tool. That is essentially all of the things that it does. It's quite a limited set of things. Its main purpose is just to be a very handy and quick way to get that work done with your metadata in your projects. It might even be something that you don't pay much attention to until you get to a point where you're wanting to export to IFC, for instance, or something like that, and you want to do a bunch of checking. You can do it there. It would also be really good for if you're working on your template and you want to make sure that everything in your template is set up right before you use it as the basis for all of your projects going forward. This will be a good way to check that as well. But yeah, so that is the CI Metadata tool. And as I said before, if you want to get a trial of that, you can go ahead and get that just via the MyCI website, or if you already have it, via the CI Tools installer. I'm just going to pause briefly to see if there's any questions, and then we'll finish up. All right, looks like no questions at this stage, so we'll finish up for today. So yeah, that has been the metadata tool. Thanks for watching, everyone. Next week, we are going to be looking at the quantities tool, which shares a lot of DNA with the metadata tool. If you are interested particularly in doing things to do with properties and classifications and that sort of thing, the quantities tool might be of interest. So that's what we'll be looking at next Thursday. But thanks for your time, and I'll catch you at the next one.